Shabbat shalom, family. Welcome back. Hope everyone's doing well out there. Hope everyone's doing well. As you can tell by the title today, we'll be getting to some information regarding migrations of our people from Canaan into Calabar, Nigeria, specifically regarding the Efik people of Calabar. All right. So I was supposed to have been reviewed some of this book. But we're going to get into it today. Again, we're going to get into it today. Let me just share my screen. And Shabbat Shalom to everybody out there in the chat. We're going to get into this book. We're not going to read the full book. We're just going to read some key pointers. But if you like this book personally to read, just email me at sonnyy4@gmail.com. Or you can just drop your email in the comment section and I'll send it to you. But again, give me a second and I'll get this book pulled up and we'll get straight into it. All right. Get this off the screen. All right. Let me zoom in. So this is the book we'll be reading from today. The Palestine Origins of the Efik. So if you're familiar with my channel, I've already done a video concerning these people. Well, like a joint video concerning the Efik peoples, the Bibios, the Nag, things of that sort when I did the Israelite history of Calabar. All right, so now this is just a book confirming or just going into the oral traditions of the Efik people themselves. Short book, but a good book. Here's the table of contents and everything. And we'll be starting at the intro, or really at the disruptions in Palestine on page 11. All right. Zoom in. And if this is good for you all, you can see and everything, just let me know if I need to zoom in or anything. All right. But we'll be starting at the top of this page on page 11. Disruptions in Palestine. All right. Give me 1 second, family. 1 second. And we can start the read. Sorry about that. One second. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So it says, Bright in a history of Israel records that the history of Israel, as the Bible presents it, began with the migration of the Hebrew patriarchs from Mesopotamia to their new home, and homeland in Palestine. Unfortunately, in the third millennium, during the transitional period between the final phase of the early Bronze Age at the first phase of the Middle Bronze Age, life in Palestine suffered a major disruption. Suffered a major disruption at the hands of the nomadic invaders. It goes on to say a lot of damage was done to the Palestinian cities, and this destruction brought the early Bronze civilization to an end. It goes on to say these newcomers did not rebuild the destroyed homes and could not even settle down other than being interested in continuing their nomadic life. Nevertheless, after a considerable interval, they gradually started to build and settle down within villages. By the end of the third millennium, these villages were known to have existed in East and West Jordan, in the Jordan Valley, and as far as the Negev. As God would have it, in these early centuries of the second millennium, witnessed in Palestine a gradual recovery from their upheavals and disruptions of the centuries. All right, so we get into the upheavals and the uprisings in early Levant history. But it says in the beginning of the 19th century, Palestine experienced a remarkable recovery due to the wave of a fresh and vigorous cultural influence spreading over the whole Palestine and Syria, where new and strong cities began once more to appear, and urban life flourished in abundance. All right. It says this period of revival did not last long because of the power struggle and the constant confusion in the Orient. All right. And we know that Orient just means the Middle East or the East. It says as a whole from the mid 18th century BCE, even as Hannibal or all right, sorry about that, family. Could you all hear me that whole time? Drop a just drop something in the chat. Let me know if you all could hear me that whole time. 1 second while I wait on that. All right, so we was good. So sorry about the disruptions, but let's get into it, family. It says Egypt entered a period of foreign domination, while in Babylon the glories of Hammurabi steadily slipped away. The situation in the Orient was never a steady one. It was full of ups and downs, rise and fall, joy and void, war and peace, unity and disunity, until the Palestine or the Philistine aggression, which brought to Israel and Palestine utter disaster. So far, all that is known of the origin of Israel and her prehistory before her or before she began her life as a people in Palestine is derived from the narrative of the Hexateuch, which preserves for them the national tradition of the people. No other ancient people had tradition in a way or any comparable way. And as a matter of fact, the words of Bright, or in the words of Bright, for wealth of detail, literally beauty, and theology depth, they are without parallel among their kind in all of history. It goes on to say, but the fall of the Israelite Confederacy after some 200 years of existence before the Philistine aggression brought Israel under the Philistine yoke. The decisive blow was struck sometime after the said aggression of 1050 BCE near Efik at the edge of the coastline plain or the coastal plain that's recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 4, verses 1 through 2. It reads, and the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out against the Philistines to battle and pitched besides Ben-Ezer, and the Philistines pitched in Efik. So we see Efik was an ancient territory in the Levant. So it says and the Philistines put themselves in array against Israel. And when they joined battle, Israel was smitten before the Philistines, and they slew of the army in the field about 4,000 men. It goes on to say, this was built one of the many. This was but one of the many battles in the Orient where Palestine was often destroyed or disrupted, conquered, destroyed, and occupied. As a result, the surviving population was usually and constantly drifted here and there. The Philistine aggression, as earlier said, caused great norm to these people, to the people. It goes on to say that the revolt of 580 to 539 BCE again ran through Palestine, and the population spread as far as Lower Egypt, where a flourishing colony of Palestine was founded at the first counteract of the Nile. Next followed a riot in the colony caused by the resurgent Egyptian nationalism in the 4th century BCE. And we're actually going to get into this a little bit on the next video we do, specifically with the founding of Elephantine and that whole Jewish colony. But it says, and this again spread the population further into the Sudan during this resurgence in the 4th century BCE. It goes on to say thereafter, the Maccabean revolt and war following the annexation of the of Palestine in 198 BCE to the Seleucid Empire and the obnoxious policy of outright rebellion of the Jews drifted many more into the Sudanese territories in Africa. The policies evoke bitter opposition among the Jews who were loyal to the religion of their forefathers. They vehemently opposed it because of its oppression and retrogressive tendencies. In fact, it proscribed their religion, forbade circumcision, suspended sacrifices and observances of the Shabbat and their traditional feasts, among other measures, of which any disobedience carried the death penalty. And we know this is true. It says, later on came yet the Roman conquest of Palestine in 63 BCE or AD. It says, in a revolt that followed in the first and second centuries AD. These last incitements to many people might appear to be the end of the life of the Jewish community in Palestine, but to many others it may not be. The Efiks or the Efiks, which is the Efiks of Nigeria, or Calabar, who had been so drifted along, later found their greatest number at the close of the second century AD. So remember that mark. Okay, again, family, my mic is messing up for a second, so if I just cut out, just let me know. But I'm back. But again, remember this time period, the second century AD was when they started to drift away in Egypt. This is a fairly recent migration. So again, in the second century AD, they started to drift away into Egypt. From there, they drifted further into the Nile Valley and ancient Nubia around the third and fourth centuries AD. They actually settled for a long time in Nubia before arriving in the Sudan in the 10th century AD. Nubia, on the other hand, is described in the Gazer of the world as ancient Ethiopia, south of Egypt and Africa, now included in Anglo-Egyptian Sudan and Khartoum as capital. She is known to the Egyptians as Cush, while the Greeks regard her as the land of burnt faces, or simply as black men, or Ethiopia. All right. Geographically, she extends on both sides of the Nile, starting from the first um, cataract of the Nile, where the drifted population from Palestine founded the flourishing colony of Elephantine, and thence to the sixth cataract below Khartoum. Nubia was directly on the principal trade roads from Chad region of west to the Red Sea on the east. All right. So again, remember that Nubia was directly on the principal trade roads from the Chad region to the west, um, and the Red Sea on the east. So in Nubia, you had trade stations or trade routes or roads that stretched from the Red Sea all the way to Chad, West Africa. And we know that the Jews, a lot of the times, followed the trade routes into West Africa. So this is a possible migration route of these people. It says to the east across the Red Sea is the Arabian Desert and the Nubian Desert to our north. The Libyan Desert extends from North Africa southward into our borders, while it says Port Sudan on the west bank of the Red Sea not only serves as a gateway to both of the Reds and the Mediterranean seas, but also a starting point of the caravan routes throughout Khartoum westward into the Chad region. The whole of Nubia, engulfed within the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan, has her boundary to the southeast with Ethiopia and existed as part of the parcel of Egypt, the Sudan, and Ethiopia. The above descriptions make it clear why knowledgeable Efik paramount ruler and chiefs related their origin to the Sudan, Egypt, North Africa, and Palestine during the Hart Ickery. It says Etuborn, and excuse me if I butcher these names, family. It says Etuborn, a pink young Efok, Asama. I'm gonna skip these. It says Iye, honesty. I believe this is the eighth, was therefore correct to say before the Hart inquiry that the Efik people were a nomadic tribe in the Sudan. It says the Neterio family said that the Efiks migrated from their original home and wandered to Egypt. And in the writing, Chief Efiwat continued that they originated somewhere in North Africa, probably near Palestine. All right. And this is coming from the chiefs of these people's tribes. All right. This is what they're saying when they're being inquired about their origins. And this is what they're telling them. Hey, we came from Palestine. We came from the north. We came from north of Egypt. We stayed in Egypt for a little while. We came into Sudan and we wandered west across the Sahara. It says, Ayi in his old Calabar throughout the centuries says the ancestors of the Efik seem to have migrated across the Sudan to West Africa in the early years of the second millennium AD. All right. Again, this is fairly recent. All right. This is about 600 years ago, if this story is true. It says again, the ancestors of the Efik seem to have migrated across the Sudan to West Africa in the early years of the second millennium AD. Excuse me, that's not 600 years ago either. I'm sorry about that. But it says also in the heart anchory, Etubone, I'm just going to say Etubone, the fifth, the Obong of Calabar said, the Efiks were an Oriental tribe whose home was in Palestine. Efik history starts with the origin of the Efiks. The origin has been for long a subject of unwarranted attacks and controversies, but so far the results of our recent research has now unveiled the hidden truth which hereto was known only to the wise man from the Orient, indicating the area of the earliest aboriginals in the Cross River state, Agandunu, would wish researchers to exclude the Efiks because, according to him, what is certain is that the Efiks and the Afut ethnic groups must be excluded from the investigation. Why is that? Because they're not Aboriginal Calabarians. It says, for their origins outside the southeastern state, as now fairly well ascertained through current research. From Ethiopia or ancient Nubia, Efiks met the Ibibios in their present homes before they moved to their present Efik territory much later. And I actually have the book regarding the Ibibios on the way of Calabar as well. The Ibibio Jews of Calabar, I believe it's called. So I'm waiting on that, and we're going to be reading some of that on the channel as well. All right. It says, Gadonu has as far back as 1970 built on Ethiopia or ancient Nubia as the oriental home of the Efiks. Ayihu in 1967 asserted that the origin of the Efik people points to the Orient, but could not say definitely what part of or area of the Orient has recently, as a result of extensive research, come with a clue to locate the exact source of origin, of their origin. He now arrives at Nubia or Ethiopia, as Gondonu also stands between the ancient Nubia and Ethiopia. But researchers do, however, agree on Nubia, since both the Greek Ethiopia, or excuse me, the Greeks, Ethiopia is another name for Nubia, which has her southeast boundary with Ethiopia. In a research like this, it is always expedient to start by exploring from the known to the unknown. So that is why my first works applied a reverse gear which traces a Efik's origin from the present locations, first at Uran, from where the Ibom, or from where Ibom and Igbo land was researched, all right, or was reached. This is an indisputable fact of history. Anyone who thinks otherwise is yet to be originated or oriented. It says from Ibom, the reverse gear went as far back as the Orient. And this is also a known fact to those who are posed or who possess the knowledge. Those who do not know are now in the position to gain from this most recent research. But as I had earlier said, it is the missing link to connect us with the exact location in the Orient that remains to be traced. In locating Nubia or Ethiopia, he says, it is therefore most probable that Efik ancestors who brought those names were a segment that broke off from the tribe among the ancient Nubians or Ethiopians. All right. Again, he continues. Naturally, most of those who had left Nubia or Ethiopia must perhaps have perished and their descendants carried on the journey. All right. And we see that they carried on the journey and they carried but even they carried on their name as well. It says, from all indications, considering the section which gives cognate facts in support of the Efik's or Oriental origin, any unbiased historians with a fair and clear mind would readily, for himself, would readily see for himself that the Efiks are Orientals. Maybe Nubia or Ethiopia might be the discovered missing link because it could possibly be held that the Efiks did originate somewhere further in the Orient before coming into Nubia or Ethiopia. And that's very important because just because people say they came from Ethiopia or we came from Egypt, that doesn't mean that's where they originated. Especially when we look into people's Y chromosome, we see they're not even related to the Aboriginal Nubians or Egyptians. All right, but it says the Feeks are, by the nature of their own origin, used to a nomadic life as recorded by the heart in the vine, or in this vein. The Feeks moved from place to place and fell foul of the people of the places to which they traveled. So they kept moving until finally a body of them arrived at Greek town. Thus, this work, having a chronicle events in Palestine from the time of the Israelites settled there to the periods of the disruptions and movements into Egypt, Sudan, and Nubia, it is quite likely that the consequent upon these disruptions, the feet could be among the ethnic groupings which drifted from Palestine into these areas where they made a home at Nubia. It is therefore my consideration or considered opinion arising from the most recent research that the Efik's oriental home is Palestine. It is agreed, no doubt, that they did settle for a long time in Nubia, having arrived from Egypt. Their next port of call was the Sudan. My arriving at Palestine as our oriental home is fully backed up with historical developments which are common to both the Efeks and Palestinians. It goes on to say, in fact, part from the general known similarities between us and the Orient, there are so many interesting facts and revelations which are only peculiar among us and Palestinians in particular. When we talk of Palestine, we should not forget the influence and impact of Egyptian culture over the surrounding areas, because some of these characteristics are reflections of Egyptian mysteries, as evidenced in the Efik fraternity of the Efiks, as an example. All right. So it says Bright makes it clear that the Egyptian sphere included Western Palestine, Phoenicia to a point north of Bylos, and southern Syria. Nubia was also for some period a dependency of Pharaohs, since a part of her territory is in Egypt, and in the Sudan and Ethiopia, which once conquered Egypt, brought Nubia into her control. And so the culture of Palestine is a combination or assimilation of the culture threads of the ethnic groups. It will certainly be seen that the origin of the feast from Palestine is an authentic history of the people. Even the name of Efik, allegedly to have been acquired by them from Uran, traces its origin to the Orient. And my family names trace themselves, excuse me, it says, and my family names trace themselves about to the land of the Orient. The whole myth or mystery surrounding the Efik origin from Palestine has come to unfold herself. So we dealing with the migrations. It says, my hypothesis is that the Efiks originated from Palestine. They drifted through Egypt, the Nile Valley, into ancient Nubia, and passed through the Sudan into the modern Nigeria. It may be recalled that it was the late Asin Efik Okuda V, a Bong of Calabar, while doing the heart inquiry, said that the Efiks were an Oriental tribe whose home was Palestine. All right. For mere recapitulation, it might be necessary to run through section 2 of this work of disruptions in Palestine, the various wars, battles, and revolts that drifted the city population into different areas in the Oriental world. One of the latest of these upheavals, which drove the people out of Palestine, was the Roman conquest in 63 BC, and the revolts that followed in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. Among those who escaped into Egypt and ancient Nubia were the Efiks, originally spelled Efik or Hafik. These Hafiks were drifted throughout Egypt into the Nile Valley and further to ancient Nubia, which is fully described in section 2, which we just read. This was between the 3rd and 4th centuries AD. Before going further, the origin of the name Efik is to be cleared. In the heart inquiry, in the art inquiry, or in the heart, it is recorded. Thus, the name Efik, which derives from the Efik verb fik, to press, was a much later date given to them by the Ibibios, who, in one encounter or the other, had taste of Efik's brutal aggressiveness or assertiveness. It says this is far from the truth. The Efiks carried their name as original from Palestine. In my earlier work, it is clearly stated that the name evolves from Hebrew, Efik or Hafik, all with one and the same meaning. We can take a look at Judges chapter 1, verse 31. It reads, neither did Asher drive out the inhabitants of Akko, nor the inhabitants of Zidon, nor of Halab, nor of Akzib, nor of Halab, nor of Efik, nor of Rahab. All right, so we see Efik was a territory. And this territory was actually later inhabited by the tribes of Asher. Also, 1 Kings 20 and 30 says, but the rest fled to Efik into the city, and there a wall fell upon 27,000 of the men that were left. Again, Efik in Hebrew means men or place of battle, from which might be arisen the notion of Efiks being said to be aggressive or troublesome. It is thus certain that after many centuries of daily usage, the word have evolved into Efik. By the time the Efiks arrived at Uran, Efiks are no oppressors, neither aggressive nor troublesome as alleged. They are peace-loving, kind, and gentle, especially to strangers at their door. Both Akon and Panam, Ikirik, testify to this statement as they write. In these trading stations, the Efik masters were very friendly with the Uran people, who in turn were hospitable. And Ganduno adds, it would appear that the enemies of or rivals regard them as oppressors, but the Efiks themselves are great lovers of freedom. The search for which they would take the most drastic steps. Nothing also can convince anyone that a handful of Efiks as strangers at Uran could oppress a combined force of both the Abibios and the people of Uran, to the extent of being so regarded as oppressors, which eventually could earn them the name Efik. All right, so they're saying this name did not come from the Ibibios, but they carried it from Israel into Calabar. All right, and it's just changed from the spelling basically of Efik to Efik. That's what we see today. It says, if they were so strong and oppressive, then the Uran episode which sent them out would have ended in their favor and permanent stay. However, the migrations as a whole went in stages. So we got to get into the migrations a little bit. Starting with Palestine. It says, the first leg of their journey has already taken them out of Palestine as far as Nubia. Between the 4th and 6th centuries AD came a new stage or a new wave of religious movements into Nubia and Ethiopia. It was a combination of both Orthodox and Monophite Christian church, which owed its spiritual alliances to the Coptic patriarchs of Alexandria and Egypt. All right, so I'm going to Nubia or Sudan. Again, start from the 7th century AD onwards, there was a great and widespread religious revolt in Africa caused by the Arabs in their fanatic drive to diffuse the Mohammedan religion from Arabia. These religious wars struck deadly blows on the three early kingdoms of Egypt, Nubia, and Ethiopia, which had already opted for their orthodox and monophysite Christianity. Because of the widespread persecutions by the Muslim and national disasters arising thereof, the vast populations of these kingdoms was accordingly on a run in two directions, southward and westward, along the ancient caravan trade routes to the Sudan, in search of new homes, peace, and tranquility. Thus, the Efiks, on the second leg of their journey, moved out from Nubia between the ninth and 10th centuries. All right, again, remember these dates, family. They left the Sudan, or they left Nubia between the ninth and 10th centuries to the Sudan as a result of religious persecutions by the Muslims or the Arabs. Some even left earlier into the Sudan. They settled not too long there before moving out because of the drought and the weather when compared with the Mediterranean breeze and the fertility of the Nile. Their stay in the Sudan was more or less a sojourn which within the 10th century AD landed them in Nigeria through the Chad region. Hart report on this says the Efik people were a nomadic tribe in the Sudan. After crossing the Suez, they wandered for many years in North Africa and crossing the Sahara, entering Nigeria. All right. And yes, the brother says there's an Efik in Nigeria. That's very interesting. I have to look at that. And shalom, shalom, brother Don. It goes on to say, Aye has it that the ancestors of the Efik seem to have migrated across the Sudan to West Africa in his old Calabar through the centuries. And in the recent essay, he says, it is most probable, too, that the Efik's ancestors first settled in the Sudan, but the drastic desiccation of the vast landmass with its accompanied drought and the subsequent jihads, or the Muslims or the Arabs that followed, expelled its inhabitants and sent them heading towards the Lake Chad basin. Their stay in the Sudan appeared never to have been permanent. It was question of sojourn, moving on, halting temporarily, and fighting for the survival which covered a long period indeed. Their coming across or through the Sudan, settling or being a nomadic tribe in the Sudan or crossing the Sahara or Suez and wandering in North Africa, boiling down to only one fact that they came from the Orient within or close to the Mediterranean region, according to De Berg and the Legacy or the Ancient World, had been the meeting place of the world's trade. It was where commerce and civilization developed along the commercial highway and the links for international intercourse to aid the disruption not merely of material products, but also of ideas and habits of life. Hence, the history of civilizations from the earliest record or recorded time has been the history of the Mediterranean area. And such, it remained until the discoveries of the great navigators at the close of the 15th century bore fruit in the um, oceanic civilizations amidst which we live today. It is also clear that all those who talked of Efik origin from the Sudan, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Palestine and North Africa were saying one and the same thing during the Hart inquiry. It is so because, as earlier said, Nubia was part of the parcel of the paracle of the Sudan of Egypt existing by then as ancient Ethiopia, Palestine as the Holy Land, for the rest has the Egyptian province of Sinai of her south and the Mediterranean Sea on the west. The movements from Palestine being not peaceful took different directions. So while some went through Egypt, others went across the Red Sea from the east bank through the Arabian desert to the west bank to join those who were heading to Egypt. All right. And this sounds very familiar to the story that Eldad the Danite was saying. Now, this is much earlier or much later rather than the Eldad migration. But even he said you had a branch that went straight through the Negev into Egypt, and you had a branch that migrated across the Red Sea and crossed the Red Sea into Egypt. So this is, something we see repetitive with Israelite migrations. Generally, not all could move at the same time and in the same direction. This applied to all starting points of their migrations: Palestine, Nubia, Sudan, Ebom, Iran, Epochine, and Creektown. There's also the tendency of a forward and backward movements at times. It says from North Africa, Tripoli, Benghazi, and Derma were the ancient caravan trade routes running south to west across Africa, and another port from Port Sudan on the west of the Red Sea running through Khartoum to the Chad province and the west coast of Africa. Also, with these networks of transport and communication within Africa, the mystery behind the origin and migrations of the Feeks from the origins of Palestine is broken. All right, so he's saying the secret or the mystery behind how they migrated from Palestine to Western Africa is broken because all they did was follow the trade routes. All right, they went straight from Palestine through Egypt down into Nubia and just followed the trade route west across the Sudan. All right. So we're dealing with the Sudan or Nigeria or Ebom. It says, consequently, the Efik having finally left their original home of Palestine to Nubia through Egypt and the Red Sea, having settled there around the 4th century AD, left between the 9th and 10th century AD to the Sudan, where they also settled for a certain period, as earlier said. The journey from Nubia went westward through Khartoum, the Sudanese capital of the ancient trade or caravan routes from Port Sudan on the west coast of the Red Sea, as described above, to the Chad province to the northeast of Nigeria. They entered Nigeria in the 10th century AD. From there, thus, the third leg of their journey took them from Sudan into Nigeria. They took this shortcut because immediately to the north were the Nubian Desert and Libyan Desert on the northwest, while the Great Sahara ran through the northwest to the northeast. Since the Bilma oasis was a bit further in the desert, they decided to move in the direction of Chad to benefit from the green pasture and the water on the lake. Very importantly, they were following a well-laid down track which made for a smooth journey. They moved in from the northeast direction and settled first in Igbo land for a century or so. All right, so they settled amongst other Israelites when they first came into Nigeria, and that's going to be very important because we're going to read something, very important later on that connects with that. But it says Ganandu confirms that the Efiks did certainly migrate from the Orient, Ethiopia or ancient Nubia to meet the Ibibios in their present home before they moved to their present Efik territory much later. The Efiks were a large tribe of 12 clans who, when they left their Palestinian home in search of a better life and place, but before entering Nigeria at the Chad, some of them had gone further west and south into the present area of Ghana. Others went south from the Chad borders into present western Cameroon, while a third group still went south through the Benin into the Congo region. All right. The largest group was, however, the one that entered Nigeria and settled first in Igbo land, Utu, Umu, Ahia, and Itu, Ibuzu, or Ibozo, and Ibom, and Orochukwu. And Orochukwu, I believe means children of God, and even Ahia means children of Levi, because Ahia or Ahijah is actually a son of Levi in the Bible, and Umu in Igbo language means child or son or children, really. But the present Umu Ahia Ibuku was named by them as Umu Ahia Abuku after the ancestors of the Efik Abuku. And there is today a village known as Tumu or Umu, which originally belonged to the Omobo family of Creektown who settled there. It says Ayi is of the opinion that most of those who had left Nubia or Ethiopia must have perished and their descendants carried on the journey, with their names and traditions preserved intact to the Chad destination. He goes further in confirmation of the above splits by saying they seem to have been many, but suffered constant split in their ranks. One group headed south into the present Nigeria. Another group must have moved southeast towards the lower Congo in western Cameroon, as evidenced by linguistic links between the Efiks and some Congolese. But I thought that Bantus and West Africans don't have no connections. All right, I keep telling you all that you all have genetic connections, and you also have migration connections as well, and you also have linguistic connections, and this is just one of them. But again, some move to the Lower Congo and Western Cameroon as evidenced by the linguistic links between the Efiks and some Congolese, because in the Congo there are Efik names, also like Edim, Utu, Mbo Utu, which is known in Congo as Mbuntu. And in the Western Cameroon, if the Efik tongue is spoken, and we know that Cameroon is really a lot of Bantu territories. You have Bantu tribes there. You also have a few Fulani. You have a few Igbos, and you also have a few Efiks. It says yet another group must perhaps have headed still west, all fighting their way to the coast. Probably this last westward group must have arrived in the present Ghana. From there are many names shared between the Efiks and these Ghanaians: Ayi, Anasa, Otu, Adim, Ata, Asim, Iku, and Basi, etc. He rounds up by saying that places of the divisions of the Efik's ancestors was somewhat further north of the Lake Chad, and that those who branched off into Ghana had today lost contact completely with those who entered Nigeria. A good part of their original language was also lost. But personal names, as mentioned above, still shared between the Efiks and Ghanaians, are a fact of history which cannot be destroyed. The Akkad or the Adag Uko representatives before the hard inquiry recorded that the proper names like Ititi, Anasa, Ata are found both in present-day Ghana and Efik land. The same they continued is true of common names like Ibok, which means hand, Ikot, which means land, or leg, etc. And that there is also striking resemblances of natural features between the people of Ghana and the Efiks. The Amobo family still adds that this early connection with Ghana is evidenced by the existence in Ghana of such Efiks names as Sin, Anasi, Itu, Akwa, Ako, Ama, etc. And we know what that Ama word will go back to, Ama or Ima. It goes on to say some Efik traditional habits like elaborate mourning for the dead, women's hairstyle, the Indun, personal habit, pouring libation, etc. They say exist in Ghana. All right, we know that a lot of the Ghanaians are Hebrews. It says those who drifted south from the Chad border into the Cameroon sojourned there until they later joined the Uran, a peak exodus believed to be a Sudanese stock. By the way, to the stories of the cross rivers where they founded a home at the Idombe in the Rio de Roy. From there, they spread into the Cross River banks where they called Akwa Apa Uran before abandoning it into the mainland part of the present Cross River state to from the present Uran clan. While this mixed group with the Uran and peak immigration, it was establishing their home at Uran, the Efik mainstream, which entered Nigeria by the land throughout the Chad, was at Ibom in Igbo land. When they settled at Utu, the Igbos called them Ibrutu, all right? When they settled at Utu, the Igbos called them Utu or Ibrutu, a corruption of the words Hebrew and Utu to mean the Hebrews of Utu, in which Hebrew refers to their original or oriental stock and Utu to their new place of settlement. All right, so we see even the Igbos referred to these brothers as Hebrews when they arrived in their land. All right, they called them Ibrutu, or Ibrutu. All right, meaning the Hebrews of Utu. All right, Ibrutu, and even if Ibo or the Igbos referred to themselves as Igbos or Hebrews in the past. But owing to the religious controversy, they left Utu for Umu Ahia, and here too for the same reasons, for refusal to worship the Igbo Long Juju. Majority of them again left, leaving a few others to remain in their present Umu Ahia Ibuku, formerly known as Umu Ahia Abuku, in memory of their ancestor. Abuku next was Itu and Bozo, where they landed and acquired the secret of the Abon. It says, and playing thereafter they arrived Ibom in Orochukwu. It is said that Ibom was a name given by the Oros to the place where they or where the Efik settled in the Oro country. But this is not true nor correct, neither to say that it was founded by the Eco mercenaries as miscounted by Jeffries. Rather, it was originally evolved from the Hebrew word sabon, which means great or omniscient, and given to the place of the Efiks. All right. Everything great and renowned as attributed to Ibom, and so God of the universe or omniscient God is to the Afiks, Abasi, Ibom, all right, which is a Hebrew word, and he goes on to say, as evolved from the Hebrew words Abishah, Sabon, or Abasa, Sabon, all right. Again, the Afiks use the derivative or the name Abasi, Ibom, to refer to the Most High, which just means omniscient or omnipotent God, which is from the Hebrew words Abisah Sabon. All right. He goes on to say the mighty sea is in Yang Ibon, and the strong, powerful youths of Efik land are known as Ifa Ibon. And also notice within the Yoruba culture, you also have the word Ifa, which also goes back to a Hebrew word as well, which we'll see later on. But it says the Efiks remained for almost a century, from 900 AD to 1000 AD, at Ibom, and would have remained longer if not for their persistent controversies with the Aros due to the refusal to worship the Aro Long Juju in exchange for their Abasi Ibom. All right, and they shunned the Long Juju with their popular saying, Ibriti Tom, Ibritam, Itu, Ino, Awo. Afo, don't want to keep butchering this, but it means Ibritam, who wants someone to be given, and you not a person. All right, Ibritam wants someone to be given, or you not a person. All right, so what we're going to do now is just skip down a little bit because this just gets into more migrations of them in other Nigerian territories. All right, we're going to get into, I believe, the evidence of Palestine or the traditions. Yeah, so we're going to skip that, the summary and everything in support of Palestine is where we're going to begin next. All right. All right. So I'm going to skip down to, what is this, page 26. I'm going to read from here. And it says, those who might have heard for the first time in their life during a heart inquiry that the Efiks originated from Palestine or Egypt or Sudan or North Africa could not believe their ears. It says, because to them such statements were unbelievable. Dr. Udo and others of their school hold that the idea of the Efiks originated from Palestine is an imaginary theory. Udo says further that the Jews who migrated some 300 years ago from Palestine to the United States of America and other countries of Europe still keep their religion, and that not a single Efik family has today a Jewish surname. It is a pity that he talks of the Jews migrating some 300 years ago and not those within a span of more than 3,000 years ago. If one cannot recollect any Jewish surname among the Efiks, then he has himself to blame for not remembering at least such popular Efik family names like Adam and Ephraim. In fact, the present Abong of Calabar and paramount ruler of the Efiks is by name Basi Iyo Ephraim Adam III. It says of Ephraim B.K. Ratty in a short history of the Hebrews say, in fact, the history or the hill of Ephraim or Israel was naturally the most fertile, prosperous, and important part of Canaan, and until the middle of the 8th century, it unvillaibly played the chief part in the Hebrew history. Ephraim was also one of the tribes of Israel, and that is why Calabar flourishes with such powerful kings like Ephraim Duke and Duke Ephraim. All right, so this is what they have, or this is the titles of some of their kings: Ephraim Duke, and even Duke Ephraim. Ephraim Street in Calabar is also an important street. The family is one of the is one of the renowned. We're going to continue to read that on the next page, but I just want to show you this map real quick before we continue on. This is just showing, I guess you can say, the migration routes of the Efiks from Palestine into Western Africa. And again, here go all the trade routes that he mentioned earlier from Derma, from Benghazi, and also from Tripoli, extending all the way from North Africa to West Africa. All right, and this is them migrating down into the Sudan and following this trade route from the Red Sea into the Lake Chad, then branching off into Nigeria. And again, he also mentions some of them branching off into Cameroon, Congo, and even Ghana. All right, and I just wanted to point that out real quick. We can continue to read. That's just another map. But it says, the other writers of the Efiks are not lacking. It says the writers and other Efiks are not lacking in Hebrew surnames. From Iyo, Akong, Aka, Edo, the writer's full name, one can trace the surnames Aka and Edo to the land of the Hebrews. Thus, Edo or Edo is recorded in 1 Chronicles 6 and 21 as the sons of Gershom. Akkad, originally spelled as Akkad, is recorded by Bright in the history of Israel. Thus, the king of Akkad gave to Sumerian culture and political expression far beyond the bounds of the city-state. It goes on to say, of Asa, the name of the writer's mother, Rati records, thus Rehoboam's grandson, Asa, took steps to check Canaanitish worship within the palace, but Asa's son, Jehoshaphat, was really responsible for the introduction into Judah of tyrant worship. Other Jewish names borne by the Efiks follow in the proper places. There are still others among the group who believe that if the Efiks were from Palestine, they should bear the exact features of the Palestinians who speak Hebrew, worship as the Hebrews, or even be able to trace their home and relations over there. There are but plural ideas, since no sane person would ever think that after 2,000 years of sojourn far away from one's home, his offsprings have intermarried with various human races all over the world would still retain the exact ancestral feature of his forebears or of his forefathers. It is highly impossible. It goes on to say, however, in proving this theory of Efik origin from Palestine, one has the first instances to stress the importance of records in the life of a nation. Thus, the Efiks, with the knowledge of their pictographic script, the Insibidi, a reminiscent of the ancient Egyptian inscriptions with which they used among the members of the Efik of their Efik fraternity, were able to retain some of their historical occurrences. And the good thing or the sweet thing about this Insibidi language is that it's also spoken or used amongst the Igbos, and it's also spoken and used amongst certain Bantu tribes within the localities. So certain Bantu tribes within Cameroon and also in the Congo know and use the Insibidi script. All right. It says this knowledge with their culture and civilization was carried along with them from their Oriental homes. All right, so this Insibidi script is possibly something they brought from the Near East. And again, it's reminiscent to the Egyptian inscriptions, just like the early Hebrew languages, reminiscent to the early Canaanite languages. This Insibidi display was indeed an aspect of their culture which dates back to the early days when the earliest attempts of the means of communication other than the oral transmission were made in Egypt. A similar record was kept through the use of inscriptions, mostly in pictures and drawings of letter cloths, at a time when English alphabets were not yet within their reach, and some of these inscriptions were found on the walls of some houses, partly as records and partly as decorations some centuries ago. And this is within Igbo land and even within Calabar. They found these Insibidi inscriptions. They found them on homes. They found them on cloths, like weaving cloths. and closing things of that sort. But the introduction of the English alphabet, much use was made of the new techniques of the expression in the 18th century, especially when Antera Duke produced one of the earliest known specimens of recorded history in the world. Here's a typical example of people from the world of civilization, the Nile Valley, and the Mediterranean region as bedrocks of ancient civilizations. Yes, of course, as supported by a colleague, classical historical evidence coverage one of the points that the centuries of human activities in Africa in the last 3 or so millennia BC, where the Nile Valley and the Mediterranean littoral, i.e., from the western shores of the Red Sea to the Pillars of the Hercules, with Pharameric Egypt as the cultural pivot on which African civilizations revolve. Certainly, the feats came from these regions, having been drifted from Palestine by constant disruptions in Egypt, the Nile Valley, and ancient Nubia, on the western shores of the Red Sea, before their forward movement into the Sudan and into Nigeria. The Nsibiti, which is today still in use among the Efik members, is their original acquisition from this part of their original home. Apart from their earlier knowledge of writing in whichever from the acquired from the Orient, there are many other proofs of origin which follow in this order. So, customs, culture, and tradition. It says, it is better to take three together because of the related nature of their meaning. Efiks, as a result of their place of origin, are a nation of advanced culture and customs. Nair confirms by saying that in political relation, they were similar to European states in the 18th and 18th centuries. Barber, of his own description, old Calabar as being well furnished with villages and hamlets and good civilized people, with the greatest share of any European trade on the coast. These are facts which are directly related to the place of birth of the people and and as already known, effete customs and culture are directly reflections of the Oriental home or Oriental world. In support of this original Oriental theory of effete origin, attempts were made to adduce facts to this effect when councils for Etuborn Edim E. Adams drew attention to the elaborate burial customs of the Efiks, which he observed to be reminiscent of Egyptian rites. Reference to Reverend Hope Waddle, he made in his book 29 Years in the West Indies and Central Africa, where he describes King Nyamba, the fifth's death, burial, and elaboration funeral rites, coupled with the religious beliefs of the Efiks as testimonies to their original or oriental connections of the Efiks. As a matter of fact, Efik traditional burial and mourning of the dead are cognitive reflections of the Oriental customs. Efik widows are made to observe special mourning lasting sometimes 2 months, if not years, in the past, just as the Egyptians who mourned at the home for Israel. 60 and 10 days, as seen in Genesis 50:3, which reads, "And 40 days are fulfilled for him, for so are fulfilled the days of those which are embalmed. And Egyptians mourn for him 60 and 10 days." That's talking about Jacob. But it says the commissioner did conclude his observation of this score by noting that Hope Waddle in his book already quoted above does describe the yell of the acclamation and the cheering, which he heard at a grand Igbo display, as being similar to what he heard or what was heard by the lanyard on the Tigris. As described in the cheering and excitement produced coincide with what really happens exactly among the Efiks during a show, dance, or any form of cultural display. According to Lanyard, the cheering noise is made by combined motion of the tongue, throat, and hand, vibrating rapidly over the mouth by the women when the display is performed with fanciful dexterity. Efik women are very found, and this is always and always use their right hand on their mouth and vibrating the cheering sound. If the cheering is not spontaneously done, Then it follows immediately a voice of voices shout out, "Ikpok, Ikpi," or "Ikbon Anyo." Express your admiration, and shouts of "Ayo O" rent the air. The actor or actresses with this cheering is completely overwhelmed um, with excitement, which makes him or her most desperate in performing at his or her best. It says, i.e., in the support of the theory, points to the strong similarities the Efeks have with the Oriental people. He compares the brass rings Efik girls wore on the ankles, as seen in Hope Waddle in 1846, with Egyptian women wearing on each of their legs rings made by bronze, their long hair, and the habits of biting lice, which they remove from their heads before throwing it away. And of course, these people that are coming amongst the Efik and noticing their tradition, they're always going to subscribe it to quote unquote Egyptian culture. But we can see the same thing in the scripture regarding the haughty daughters of Zion, who wear their earrings and their bracelets and their all the I guess you can say the amulets and things they were wearing, because they, again, this is in the scripture, and we see the same thing amongst the daughters of Zion as described, with them wearing all this type of things, again, the jewelry and the bronze rings and those things. But it says the brass rings are today replaced with the brass bells with beads, worn by the Efeks fattened girls on the legs at the time of their outgoings or outing ceremonies. The fatting of girls itself, according to Mary Kingsley, is similar to what is practiced in Tunisia in North Africa. And it's also interesting because the Igbos also have a fattening tradition amongst them as well. But it says the Efeks throughout their journey to Igbo land and Huron carried along with them their god's plate, the Orun or the Huron Abasi, as their symbol of worship, which reflects a relic of the Ark of God, used by the Hebrew Israelites from whom they derived their origin. It says Hope Waddle, in his 29 years in West Indies and Central Africa, noted that a little tree of a particular kind grew in every man's yard. At the foot of it were one or two earthen pans or basin containing a little water. Beside it were generally seen human skulls, and over it a land turtle hanging to the tree. It says the water in the basin was never emptied out, but every prayer day, a little more was added, and something like a prayer or wish expressed for safety, success, and length of life. The basin was called God's dish. All right. It was said that they or their fathers on these occasions, all right. Again, it says, excuse me, it was said that they called on their fathers on these occasions. So we see something very similar or very reflective to the Ark of the Covenant or the Ark of God, seen amongst the Efeks, which they called the Huron Abasi, which is God's plate, all right, which is really just a basin which they pour water into. But it says Hope Water also notes that the basin were discarded in 1849, all right. This was discarded in 1849 after the Efeks had embodied Christianity in 1846. Not only the basins, but lots of Efik Oriental customs and culture was discarded, so that as at present the new generations know little or know nothing about these Oriental practices. All right. So once they was converted, or once they joined Christianity in the early or middle 1800s, they actually lost a lot of their original Oriental customs. All right. But it says personally, the writers has seen the little trees in the courtyards of the important Efik personalities. It is very true that before the arrival of the missionaries in 1846, many Efik customs were directly and purely Oriental and very different from the present day social institutions, customs, and usages of their neighbors. There are other Oriental customs of the Efik, such as pouring of libations, the use of loin cloths, circumcision, and purgations, to mention a few, which have long spread to the Efik immediate neighbors. Noah confirms this spread through context when he says the only variant to this story of Ibibio origin is the one that claims that Ibibio came out of Ethiopia and migrated into their present site through the Cameroons. But considering all these arguments already advanced against Semitic origin of the Ibibios, this version seems to be nothing more than a dim reflection of a historical migration from the east. So even the Ibibio people of Calabar, all right, who have connections to the Igbos as well, have migrations of coming from the east. All right. Does not the book East and West tell you that you had Jews or the 10 lost tribes migrate from the, North Africa and settle in the Niger River area and Great Calabar? This is the people of Great Calabar, the Efik, the Abibio. But it says in the same manner, he further disagrees with authors who relate Ibibio origin to Egypt because, according to him, they are overwhelmingly evidence of contacts and deliberate settlements, which makes similarities between Ibibios and Egyptian practices to be seen beyond the narrow view that the Ibibio originated from or resided in Egypt. Furthermore, he strongly holds that culturally similarities between Ibibios and Egyptians, like mummification, complicated the funeral rites, the use of loincloths, and anema could be the result of other independent developments or contracts. It says, on the oriental origin of the Ibibio, Noah on the whole is inclined to the Cameroon origin, where he says, in reaching the conclusion in preference to either the Egyptian or Hebrew origin, the basic assumption is paramount. If indeed the Ibibio are of Hebrew origin, the degree of cognicy between the Ibibio and other Semitic languages would have been such that it would have not escaped the notice of linguists or linguistics. And it actually haven't. I have a lot of information regarding, how similar the Ibibio language is to the Semitic tongue. All right, it's similar to the Aramaic. It's similar to the Hebrew. All right, but it says the present state of the knowledge of the relationship between these two languages can only permit the generous speculation that if there is Semitic influence in the Ibibio language, such could be accounted for by trade contracts or sheer accidents. And that's what he proposed. That's his theory. That's his opinion. But it says, rounding up these theses on the Ibibio origins and migrations, he says that written records are generally silent on the matter of Ibibio origin and migration, except vague testimonies of Ibibio antiquity. From the foregoing, it is therefore concluded that since the Efeks originated from the Orient and had for many centuries lived together with their neighbors, then existing similarities of the Oriental practices with those of the neighboring are the direct borrowings from the Efeks. All right. In short, throughout their age-long contact with the Efeks, these neighbors have adopted these Oriental practices since, according to Noah, they never settled among the Egyptians, nor the Egyptians neither among them. And again, I would disagree with this because the Efeks and the Bibios, again, they have the same Y chromosome, meaning they would come from the same paternal ancestor. So if the Efeks are claiming to be Israelites, the Bibios would have a claim at being Israelites as well. Now, they could have been separate migrations, but again, we'll get into that once we get into the Israelite history of the Efik, whenever that book gets here. But it says Hope Waddle Hope Waddle is earlier quoted as one of the witnesses, one who witnessed some of these Oriental cultures and practices among the Efeks on his arrival here in 1846. He describes the funeral of King Ayamba V in 1847 as similar to those of Egyptian kings and noblemen. Earlier in 1846, he wrote, circumcision, the sprinkling of blood on the doors, and other Hebrew customs are retained in Calabar. How these people came to practice such things, they know not. Thus did their fathers, and so do they without why. And this is always the the explanation when these explorers, when these travelers, when these missionaries ask these peoples, how do they do these customs or why? They just say because our fathers did it, because our fathers did it. Again, thus did their fathers, and so do they, without why. So they don't question it. They just do what their fathers did. And again, in 1848 or in 1858, he wrote that of washing for defilement contracted by touching of a dead body or a grave reminds us of the ceremonial laws of the Jews. All right. This writer personally saw the practices and took part a childhood during the funeral ceremonies at the death. In front of the deceased house or inside his or her compound was placed a basin with some mixture for washing of hands when returning from the burial or touching of a dead body. Because again, it was unlawful to not purify yourself after touching a dead body. All right, that's scriptural. It says a kind of grass, an egg, and water, among other things, were put inside of the basin for the Jewish ceremony of purification and protection against the dead. Christianity has, however, swept this along with along with all other Oriental practices of the Efiks into the Atlantic. All right, because again, some of the Efiks were victims of the slave trade, a considerable amount. A lot of slaves came from the Calabar region. It says Dr. William F. Daniel in 1841 related that the practices of circumcision in Old Calabar is of the Hebrews when at the end he concludes that these views are partly conformed with the laws or the Mosaic law mentioned in the 15th chapter of Leviticus. All right, so he said they even have these Mosaic laws that he observed within the 15th chapter of Leviticus. Even the biennial purgation of the whole community, known by the Efik as Indok, is a form of the Jewish Passover, which celebrates the Efik's usual celebrated in commemoration of the ancient Egyptian and Jewish festival. So also was the practices of smothering blood on doorposts during these rites to drive away bad spirits amongst the Efiks. All right, we know what this goes back to as well, Passover, where it says Reverend Anderson witnessed the typical Indok celebration in Old Calabar in the 1800s. In November 1850, he writes, a cock speak or a cock crow. This morning, guns were fired, bells were rung, and all sorts of noises were made to frighten the devils and ghosts out of the town. As will be seen later, both the Efik Masquerade and the Igdim or the Indim Efik paramount bear resemblance respectively to those to the Isis of Egypt and to the supernatural mother of the Ebonk Efik and the Isis of the Egyptian goddess, which ranks the Efik goddess. All right, but it goes on to say both are typical or typified by a serpent in red color, and both are in water. All right, so let's see where we at. Let's see what we're gonna continue to read. Okay, we're gonna read a few more pages before we wrap this up. And again, if you would like this book to read on your own, just drop your email in the comment section. Do not drop it in the chat because I will not be able to see it after the video, but drop it in the comment section, or just email me at sonofyah4 and I will give it to you. Where was we at? All right, but it says that the Efiks while at Uran were accused of wizardry and having a secret hand in the frequent seizure of the children of their host by crocodiles. The occurrence became more rampant on the arrival at Uran, and certainly being naturally seafarers, they have the supernatural power of black art by which they can either change it to crocodiles or command them to do havoc to their enemies. This is typical of these the people who live by the water. And the feats from the Oriental homes to the present are always by the sea. All right, because even when they was in Israel, they lived by the sea, and when they came to Nigeria or Calabar, they settled amongst the coastlands of Calabar and amongst the great river of Calabar. All right, but it says a case in support of and hand, a case in support and of to relate Efik origin to the Orient is that of an army of who was drowned in the Nile by a hired crocodile for committing adultery with the wife of an Egyptian nobleman. This incident is clearly evident in the origin of the Efik around Egypt and their settlement thereof, the land. Similar occurrences are common among the Efiks as evidences by most recent happenings in Creektown, the matter of which has been reported to the Abong of Calabar for investigation and action. As seafarers, the Efiks take to fishing a major occupation. Next is commerce, trading, in the form of the type of their international trade with the Portuguese and the European nations. Farming comes last, and this was exactly the pattern of trade among the Hebrews. The Jews were international traders and really wealthy. Efiks have regards for wealth, as they themselves were fabulously wealthy. When one recollects the king Eo Honesty II had many thousands of slaves, 400 canoes, with a captain and a crew for everyone. All right. And this is one thing you're gonna have to get over, man. Our people had slaves. All right, just get over it. It might not be to the same extent as what we went through within the Americas. Of course, we know that, but again, we did have slaves, and even in Israel, some of our people had slaves or servants or bondsmen. It says his trade amounted for several thousand puncheons of oil annually, and in 1857, he had a ship which carried his trade goods between Old Calabar and Liverpool. All right, that's real good right there. That's a lot of territory or a lot of space. It says this is the spirit of the Jews. All right, that's from Old Calabar to Liverpool. That's in Europe. But it says the Jews, the Efiks, he says, like the Jews, the Efiks circumcised their children on the 8th day after birth and have the 8th day. All right. So again, like the Jews, the Efiks circumcised on the 8th day and have the 8th day per week. Calabar also like the Jews. And Herodotus on the use of the clysters and other forms of purgation writes, for 3 successive days in each month, they purged the body by means of emexics and clysters. This is out of regards for their health. It goes on to say somewhere, or this is actually cut off, but I believe it's Ice the second, names and words and similarities. But it says today Efik language is the state lingua franca, spoken, understood, and written in nearly all local government areas in the Cross River State. Its origin is naturally related to the origin of the Efiks. Both the people and the language originated from the Orient. Reverend Hugh Goldie did make tentative suggestions to the philological affinities of the Efik by drawing attention to the similarity between it and the Semitic language. All right, and this is actually the book I was making reference to. But it says similarities between the Efik and the Semitic language, and also to its relationship with the Syro-Arabic and the Hebrew language. Semitic embraces any of the groups or of races that include the Hebrews, Arabs, Phoenicians, and Assyrians. The above idea from Reverend Goldie are to be elaborated upon in support of the Palestine theory. Reverend Hope Waddle is said to have got about 120 verbal, phonal, and etymological similarities between the Hebrew and Efik language, while Chief Oku Robi Asquano or Asquo claims to have got up to 3,000 words, which belong to both the Efik and the Hebrew words or Hebrews in meaning. His Royal Highness Asin Efik Oku V, late Abong of Calabar, in an interview with the Nigerian radio in 1974 said, all peoples in all places at all times have their traditions, norms, and beliefs. Among the Ifa Ibom, which is a generic name for the Efiks, there are such beliefs as Indim. All right, and Indim is a Hebrew word for Gideon. And angelic messenger, or it goes on to say Abasi Ibom from Hebrew, which is Abashi, or Abasha Shabon, meaning God, the impulsion, and Abasha Madim from Hebrew, which is in Hebrew Abasha Madum, which means God of hosts. And this is all within the Efik language. It goes on to say, it is interesting to note that Calabar, the name of the Efiks metropole, said to have been derived from the Portuguese word cala and bara, which means the bar silent, is now proved to have evolved from the Hebrew words Calab and Beth. All right, let me highlight that. But Calab and Beth, the first is said to mean flowing milk, while the second place means um excuse me, while the second means place. All right, we know that Beth means house or place, but Calab means flowing milk. So both thus combined means the place of flowing milk under the name Caleb Beth or Calabar, which finally ends with Calabar. If the Efiks came from the Orient, Caleb and Beth are Oriental words, then the present discovery should be superseded the previous one. The principle should apply equally to the present discovery of the origin of the word Efik. After all, Calabara was a suggestion from the Portuguese in the same way the Dutch came out with their own adult Calabar or Calabar for old Calabar. There were still other names like Calabarese, Calabara, and Kalugbar Count. According to Count, it says the previous suggestions were mere speculations without a base, while the present one is based on facts of history. And it would be based on facts of history if you take into account that these were Hebrew peoples that migrated to this territory and gave it its name. Again, we can see how Calabar would be a derivative or I guess you could say rendition of Caleb Beth. Calabar, Caleb Beth. It says it is original, and that is why the Efiks regard Calabar from the early stage of their settlements as Canaan. In support thereof, Hart compares the wandering of the Israelites from Egypt until they reached the land of Canaan with that of the Efiks until they reached and settled in Atakpa, which is fondly called Canaan by the Efiks. There are too many similarities between Efik names and words and those of the Hebrews. Our theme in Hebrew stands for our ancestral father, which in Efik takes the form of Atinyin or Atinyin, meaning our father. The Hebrew word for a high and mighty seat is Abikpong, with an Efik equivalent of Abikpo. A lot of these words, especially personal names, are found in the Bible, the Old Testament. Some of these examples, along with a few other words, are hereby produced within Table 1. All right, and this is more than likely what we're going to wrap it up at. But before we wrap it up, I'm going to go to these tables. Yeah, we're going to view these tables, and then we're going to wrap it up. Let me see what comes after this. Just to see if we're going to wrap it up for sure. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to look at this real quick, and then we're going to look at the ancestral table of the Efiks. But this is just a comparison between the Efik names and Oriental names or Near Eastern names. And here we have Adiaha. All right. We see what it goes back to, First Chronicles. Ada, or Edom. We see this in Genesis. Abia goes back to First Chronicles. All right. Adusha, Abishu, First Chronicles. So we see all these names going back to Old Testament names. Edim, Anim, First Chronicles. All right. Even on this side right here, we have Edim, Edom, Edo, Akkad, Asa, Adam, Ephraim. All right. And again, a lot of their rulers are called by the name of Ephraim. We have Etah, right, which is Judah or territory of Judah, or son of Judah, I believe. It's either a territory or a son of Judah. And we have that within the Efik language and the Hebrew language as well, with First Chronicle for reference. And again, we see Efik within Judges and even First Chronicles. We see Tom and Etham. Again, that's Judah again. And we see Duke and Duke. Here's more examples, the English words compared to the Efik and Oriental, and then the reference names. All right. And again, you can look at this shit yourself if you would like. Just email me or drop your email. Here's some more comparisons. English and Efik and the meaning. How some Efik or English words are similar to ancient Efik words. All right, so we're just going to skip up real quick, and I'm going to show something very, very interesting. We got the migrations and the history behind, who these people would come from. We got the time period and things like this. So who do these people claim descent from? We know that Efik is a territory of Asher, so it could be probable, or it's highly possible, that they do have descendants of Asher amongst them. But we're gonna, look at this and see what they say for themselves. And when we take a look, we're gonna start on this page at the Efik ancestors and their 7 clans. All right, so we have Iboku. All right, and we have Atia, Aton, and Ibom, and we have all these clans that branch off from these, I guess you could say, original migrants of Efiks into Calabar. Because again, remember they said when they originally left Palestine, they left with 12 clans, but when they eventually settled, they ended up with 7. So they left with 12, ended up with 7. And these are all the clans that settled within Creektown and Duketown. And a lot of these are actually Hebrew words. All right, Israelites' ancestors, it just shows from Adam to Seth to Noah to Shem to Terah to Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to the 12 sons. All right, Efik was one of the 12, or was one of the tribes that came out, many of the tribes of Israel, particularly from among the offspring of Jacob, as indicated in the works and tables. All right. And here's the ancestral table of the Efiks. We see Isaac, Jacob, and this is who they claim descent from. We can start at Asher and Amal. All right, so they claim descent from Asher by way of Amal. This will be one of their tribal clans that is within their lands today in Calabar. All right, the Amal clan, which will go back to Asher. All right, we also see Atai or Atia, which will go back to the tribes of Gad. All right, and again, we see Abuku, which will go back to Judah, and we know that Abuku was their original ancestral name. That's what they were called by, Abuku, and this is actually will go back to Bachuru or Bachiru, all right, and that's of the tribes of Judah. Also, we go to Benjamin. We can see that they have descendants of Abisu or Adisu or Adisua within Calabar, and also they have descendants of Levi by way of Ador, as they mentioned earlier within the reading, by way of Gershom. All right. So these are the Efik ancestors as Jacob's offspring. All right. So again, they would descend from, or they claim descent from tribes of Gad, Asher, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. All right. And it's very similar to the Ebos who claim, descendants from, or descendancy from Ephraim, Gad, Levi, Benjamin, Asher, Zebulun, Naphtali. And they even have the tribal names and things to back it up. The same we see here. All right. So with that, we're going to wrap that up. I'm going to take a look at the chat. Thank you for tuning in today. Most likely, I will be back tomorrow for some more information. And the brother Dorvell said, Akkad, Achad, Achad. Chad. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. And if you have any questions, concerns, comments, please drop them in the chat as of now. Before I get ready and wrap this up, if not, again, I'll see you all, y'all willing, tomorrow. Drop some more knowledge. I just wanted to get this book reading out of the way, as I was supposed to do it a while ago. But again, Let me check this comment section real quick. And again, the brother is correct. Orient doesn't have to mean Far Asia. Again, it doesn't always mean that. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. All right. So again, family, depending on what I bring out tomorrow, depending on what I get done with tonight, I'll be bringing out something tomorrow. Y'all willing, we'll be getting into some pre-Talmudic Israelites within Africa. All right. Pre-Talmudic or pre-exilic Israelites and their migrations into Africa. Just showing our tradition, showing our culture, showing our migrations into Africa. All right. So again, I see no questions. I see no comments. And with that, I say Shabbat Shalom, and I will see you all tomorrow.